Hey, folks, this is Mark Joyner, and welcome to the live mentoring for tonight. We had a couple of mix-ups tonight. First off, Eric has got a family emergency that he's got to take care of, and he's off taking care of that. So I'm here with you guys tonight. And second of all, we had a guest who was scheduled who is not here. So I'm not sure if there was a miscommunication with that guest or what, but anyway, here we are. We don't have a guest. We don't have Eric. So what you guys have got is you have got a straight 90 minutes of one-on-one with me, questions and answers. And what I want to do is I want to start out by reading a passage. You guys have heard me mention this particular book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And I want to read a passage from that book to you because I think it very well summarizes the attitude that we all need to have in situations like this. It's funny, I was just getting off a phone call with a dear friend who's going through some tough times right now. And I was like, man, I don't really have time for this phone conversation because I got to get ready for this live broadcast. But I'm going to do it anyway because this is a dear friend, and you got to help your friends out. And, this passage that I wanted to read to you guys for a little while is kind of the same sort of thing that he needed to hear in that moment. He is, going through a time of doubt in his life, as so many are right now during this COVID situation. And I wanted to help him understand, the importance of, where his mind is and how to manage that. So let me read this passage to you guys. So this particular, let's see here, hopefully I've got it right. All right, so he was talking about, going through Ranger School. Now, Army Ranger School is one of the toughest leadership courses in the world. It may, in fact, be the best leadership course there is. And it's one of the most physically demanding things you can possibly go through. They put you through multiple phases, and during these phases, you get very little sleep, and they give you very little food. And all of a sudden, it can be 2 or 3 in the morning. You're starving, you're tired, and then suddenly, like, boom, you're squad leader in charge of your squad, and you have to be able to think clearly under those types of difficult circumstances. Now, he was talking about an event that happened during what they call mountain phase. So what I want to do is, as I read this to you guys, if you guys have any questions for me, put your questions in the Talk to Mark box, and I'm going to go right into Q&A after this, and we're going to spend as much time as we can. As you guys know, during this time block, I always shut off at exactly about 90 minutes into it. And pretty soon here, I'll be putting on my blue blocker sunglasses, blocking out the artificial light. And I do this because I go to sleep at sundown every night to protect my mitochondrial health. And for those of you guys who watched Robert Winton Hunt's presentation on that about the blue light diet, you know why I do that. So let me read this passage to you. So he's talking about mountain phase. And he said, in the mountains, we learned how to rappel and rock climb, among other mountaineering skills, and became proficient in ambush techniques and mountain patrol. To prove it, we went on to 2 separate 4-night field training exercises known as FTXs. A storm blew in during our second FTX. 33-mile-per-hour winds howled with ice and snow. We didn't haul sleeping bags or warm clothes, and again, we had very little food. All we could use to keep warm was a poncho liner and one another. And by the way, if you were in the U.S. Army, you'll know these poncho liners, these like paper-thin little liners that are there to keep you dry in the rain. So it doesn't really do that much for you to keep you warm. So all we could use to keep warm was a poncho liner and one another, which was an issue because the rancid odor in the air was our own. We'd burned so many calories without proper nutrition, we'd lost all our fat and were incinerating our own muscle mass for fuel. The putrid stink made our eyes water. It triggered the gag reflex. Visibility narrowed to a few feet. Guys wheezed, coughed, and jackhammered, their eyes wide with terror. I thought for sure someone was going to die from frostbite, hypothermia, or pneumonia that night. Whenever you stop to sleep, During field tests, rest is brief and you're required to maintain security in 4 directions. But in the face of that storm, Bravo platoon buckled. These were generally very hard men with a ton of pride, but they were focused on survival above all else. I understood the impulse, and the instructors didn't mind because we were in weather emergency mode. But to me, that presented an opportunity to stand apart and lead by example. I looked at that winter storm as a platform to become uncommon among uncommon men. No matter who you are, life will present you similar opportunities where you can prove to be uncommon. There are people in all walks of life who relish those moments. And when I see them, I recognize them immediately because they are usually the mother effers who's all by himself. It's the suit who's still at the office at midnight while everyone else is at the bar, or the badass who hits the gym directly after coming off a 48-hour op. She's the wildland firefighter who, instead of hitting her bedroll, sharpens her chainsaw after working a fire for 24 hours. That mentality is there for all of us. Man, woman, straight, gay, black, white, or purple effing polka dot, all of us can be the person who flies all day and night only to arrive home to a filthy house, and instead of blaming family or roommates, cleans it up right then because they refuse to ignore duties undone. All over the world, amazing human beings like that exist. It doesn't take wearing a uniform. It's not about all the hard schools they graduated from, all their patches and medals. It's about wanting it like there's no tomorrow, because there might not be. It's about thinking of everybody else before yourself and developing your own code of ethics that sets you apart from others. One of those ethics is the drive to turn every negative into a positive. And when shit starts flying, being prepared to lead from the front. My thinking on that Georgia mountaintop was that in a real world scenario, a storm like that would provide the perfect cover for an enemy attack. So I didn't group up and seek warmth. I dialed deeper, welcomed the carnage of ice and snow, and held the western perimeter like it was my duty, because it damn well was. And I loved every second of it. I squinted into the wind, and as hail stung my cheeks, I screamed into the night from the depths of my misunderstood soul. Now, guys, that is a beautiful, beautiful passage from that book, and that is one of the reasons why I read that or have listened to it so many times. I've literally listened to that book, anywhere from 10 to 20 times at this point. When I do my ice baths, I will often turn that on just to, as I'm sitting there in the ice, because there's always going to be some language from that book that comes in there and seeps into my head. And if you guys watched, a day and a half ago, we had a gentleman come in for a follow-up session. And during the first session, I could tell that he was very down on himself. He was, he was lacking confidence. He was kind of, like in a, shoulder slump situation. And I could tell he wasn't very positive and optimistic, and he wasn't digging into his gut and, and pulling that, that manhood out of himself. And I said, look, I'm going to give you an assignment. I need you to go through Juggernaut Academy and really, really push it hard. I need you to go through Charisma Academy and really, really push it hard. And he did that. And then simultaneously, he started, going out and, on YouTube and listening to self-help videos and getting all kinds of positive information that he was dumping into his head. And when he showed up on the broadcast a day and a half ago on the live mentoring, I could see a changed man. He showed up and he brought his wife with him because he wanted his wife there to witness the commitments he was going to make for his short, medium, and long-term major focus. And I saw a guy who, went from being, very, unsure of himself to lacking confidence to becoming a guy who was like, hey, you know what? I know what I have to do now in my life. I can't run and hide from my responsibilities. What I need to know now is I need to have a plan, and I need to attack it. I need to attack it, and I need to execute on that plan. And I tell you what, it was amazing to watch his transformation. And I will guarantee if he carries on in this way, he's going to totally turn the direction of his life around. So I wanted to read that passage to you guys because that to me represents the whole thing. And I'm going to read one last part of that again, which I think is really, really critical here. He said, my thinking on that Georgia mountaintop was that in a real world scenario, a storm like that would provide the perfect cover for an enemy attack. So I didn't group up and seek warmth. I dialed deeper, welcomed the carnage of ice and snow, and held the western perimeter like it was my duty, because it damn well was. And I loved every second of it. Okay? That, to me, is the kind of sensibility that we need to have as entrepreneurs, especially right now when we are at a disadvantaged situation. As entrepreneurs right now, the government is taking away a lot of our tools. So what do? When some of our tools are taken away, we become resourceful. We dig in deeper and we get tough, and we still do our duty. We don't give up. Instead, what we do is we figure out that there's something else inside of us that was waiting to be unleashed. And you know what? These moments like this, these moments of difficulty, are beautiful opportunities for us to unleash that thing inside of us. Because if we weren't experiencing that difficulty, we may never have the opportunity to let ourselves shine in that way. So what's going on in the world right now, we should all see this collectively as a group, and by the way, we are a team, guys. We are a team. We are helping each other succeed. We should all see this together as an opportunity to find out what we are really made of, to find out what level we can attain in our lives, because we can attain a much higher level than we usually do. And in fact, without this opportunity, it's altogether possible that we would have never discovered that. I'll give you one personal example for me. So my second divorce, I was married twice, never had kids. Thank goodness I never had kids, because I would hate to have to put kids through a divorce situation. I probably would have handled things very differently. In my second divorce, I didn't handle very well. I was not prepared for it. It wasn't what I wanted personally, right? So I took it, the wrong way for a long time. But then looking back on it in retrospect, I realized, had I not gone through that experience of that, I would not be who I am today, because that triggered things inside me that would not have been triggered had I still been in the warmth and comfort of that relationship. No longer being in that relationship and being forced to re-examine my life made me dig deeper and made me figure out, man, well, I was only operating at a small fraction of who I am. And if I were to ever get into a serious relationship again, I would be very grateful that I had that experience of difficulty, because I will enter that relationship as a stronger man than I was when I was in that time of difficulty. And that's how we should all see this, because things are gonna, we're gonna have periods of greater difficulty, and we're gonna have periods of greater ease. There's all kinds of chaos, on the horizon right now. But whatever happens, see this as a blessing, because as maybe even greater or lesser challenges occur, this is preparing us to be better ready for those situations. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and dig in here into the questions, and I've got to find out. Look, I've got some folks who came in a little bit early to ask some, so that's great. All right, so let me see oh wow, we've got a bunch of folks who came in early. All right, here we go. All right, Tim McElvee's got a bunch of questions. Tim says, you mentioned in passing the other night that you started your first business while you were still in the military, and your success with that business led you to turn down a job with the FBI. Yes, that's very true. What was the first business you started, and how did that lead to your second business, and how did that eventually lead into becoming a business tycoon? What does it take for someone to go from having one successful business to having successful businesses in different industries? Okay, so first off, that wasn't really my first business, but it was my first serious business. I did lots of businesses when I was a kid. I did a lot of side stuff, a lot of side hustles, but none of them were real businesses as such. But when I was in the military, I was doing real businesses. So the very first one that I did was, even in what we call a pre-internet era, before the internet was popular, I was using these things called BBS boards, bulletin board systems. You would dial in to these systems, and you were usually on there 1 to 5 people at a time, depending on how many phone lines somebody would allow to have connected to their computer at once, right? If you guys want to look up the history of that, it's a very interesting phenomenon that was occurring before the internet really started to blow up in 1995. And, the first serious thing that I was selling was, when I was at the Defense Language Institute, I thought, wow, what a great opportunity this is. Here I am in Monterey, California, being paid to be trained a language, for an entire year, right? I mean, what a great opportunity that is. And so what I did was I started selling a product, telling people, hey, the government will actually pay for you to get free language training. If you want the government to pay for free language training, send me $20 and I'll show you how to do it, right? So I created this little report, showing them how to, through the military, you have to, I showed them the exact process that they have to go through and, and how to prepare for that, and how to qualify for it. And I started selling that. And I got to tell you, that was a really, really awesome thing, because that, it gave me hope, that this was possible. Wow, I can write something, post it on this bulletin board system, and have people, mail checks to me and cash those checks. And all I have to do to have that be legal is to mail them off some paper, of a report that I sat down and wrote in one sitting, right? And I wrote it on a typewriter. I didn't even put it on a printer, okay? And then I just made copies of it. This is, it's such a great thing when you have that first experience. After I had that, it opened my eyes. I realized if somebody's going to be able to pay you money for one thing like that, what's the limit? What's the limit? What else can you sell? And then I realized, wow, it's only the real limit is only my imagination. I mean, we can come up with any kind of product that we want, anything that our mind can concoct, we can create it. And, as long as we're, offering legitimate, real value to people, we shouldn't constrain ourselves in this way. We should just find out, does the market want it? And the only way to find out is to test. So, I started evolving into other businesses. Some of the more serious ones were, I had a website called Hot Rod Your Head, was one of the, sort of early successes. And that was a website about, personal development and about biohacking before biohacking was a term, right? And then over time, a lot of people started seeing a lot of the different websites that I was hosting that were doing very, very well, where I was selling products and doing well. And people were going to me and coming and saying, hey, we see you everywhere on the internet. How are you doing this? Like, how does this work? So I kind of by default became the internet marketing guru, right? And so I started evolving my business from the other businesses that I was running into selling, how to do online marketing. And while there were a few other people out there doing it at the time, very, very few, it just so happens that I was the guy that kind of, gained the highest level of prominence because I was innovating a lot of stuff that was very different and new, So, but to get to the real important part of your question here, so what does it take for someone to go from having one successful business to having successful businesses in several different industries? Well, Eric, you may remember him telling a story where Richard Branson gave him a little bit of a, pardon my language, a little bit of a bitch slap. And he was sitting there on Necker Island with Richard, and he said, hey, I'm a serial entrepreneur. And he was talking about all these businesses that he was running. And then Richard Branson stopped him and said, let me stop you right there. He says, you're not a serial entrepreneur. You're a parallel entrepreneur. And what's the difference? A serial entrepreneur, what he does is he starts a business, he systemizes it, okay, gets other people up running it for him. And then when that one is running, that carries on, but it carries on without him. And then he breaks off and he starts another one, okay? And then once it gets to a point where you can break away from that, where someone else is running it for you, well, now you've got both of these businesses running, and now you're up and you're doing another one. And, Richard Branson is sort of the ultimate example of that. I think he's got thousands of companies running under the Virgin brand right now, but he does all of them in serial. And he's obviously got a team of people there that help him establish those businesses under the Virgin brand and systemize them. Okay. So, Tim, I hope that helps make it clear for you. That's not how most people do it, but that's the right way to do it. Because if you break away from that other business too early, you're going to be in serious trouble. You're going to be in serious trouble. All right. Tim also says, I remember reading years ago that in the early days of the internet, online marketing pioneers like yourself would get flamed by internet users who did not want advertising on the net. How did you deal with that and overcome the issue back then? Is there anything equivalent to flaming on the internet today? If so, what would you recommend we do to overcome this modern day equivalent issue? Well, yeah. Well, flaming still exists, right? I mean, it's just there's different terms for what we call it now. It's funny when you say that word flaming. You've got my language. I'm kind of back in the old school mode now, and I'm forgetting the newer terms. But yeah, that totally happens. I mean, well, you see social media hate mobs forming, for example, right? In fact, I remember watching a comedy, a little cartoon comedy movie, or it was at least a preview for it, and there was somebody with a little phone there, and then it said, Instamob, and then they pushed a little button, and it used the internet to form a mob of people and get them angry against you. And in fact, a lot of people who are politically socialist right now are deliberately form what are called social justice mobs. They get people together, and if they see somebody behaving in a way that is in any way against their view of how people should be treated, or if they do even a mild form of what they consider to be racist, they will get these people together and get them to attack you, and in fact sometimes even try to ruin your life by complaining to your friends, complaining to your boss, get you fired from your job. This kind of thing totally exists. And if you're an entrepreneur, there are people who will do this to you, and sometimes it's your competitors. This in fact happened to me in the early days. There were people who started flaming me on bulletin boards, and these were not the BBSs that I was talking about, the pre-internet BBSs, but these were internet bulletin boards. So before we had social media, when the internet was still in the sort of like Web 2.0 era, we did have bulletin boards where people could post stuff and have conversations. It wasn't as interactive as it is right now with the modern day social media, but we still had the ability to interact. And there were people who, there were, in fact, on one bulletin board, there was a bulletin board owner who, for whatever reason, decided that he didn't like me. And, I'm pretty sure it was just jealousy, frankly. And I caught him posting under pseudonyms on his own bulletin board. And I don't need to get into the technical details of how I was able to bust him doing it, but it was very, very obvious, and he was too dumb to cover his tracks correctly, right? But I absolutely busted him, right? And I still to this day have recordings of all of it. Like if this guy were ever to come at me again, I would just destroy this guy, because I have clear documentation showing what he did, right? And by the way, you shouldn't be afraid if somebody's coming at you that hard. You need to not be afraid to be a counter striker, right? So how I dealt with it back then was not very well. I allowed it to get into my head, and that is the exact opposite of what you want to allow to happen. Because once somebody gets in your head, the battle is lost. And I allowed that to happen. That's why I did the whole farewell thing, because I couldn't take all the flaming anymore. I mean, in fact, I was like the first guy, to really get hit, very, very hard by groups like that. I mean, it was pretty intense, and some of it was justified because there were some mistakes that I made, but the vast majority of it was not, right? The vast majority of it was stuff that, some competitors were making up to attack me. So, the way I would handle it now is, first off, if it's, it's just a small thing, I would just brush it off. I'd be like, whatever, like Jay-Z says, get that dirt off your shoulder, right? Just brush it off. Just brush it off. If you don't know the song, it's a great hip hop anthem. It's a great sensibility of how you need to walk through life. It's like, whatever, somebody's got a problem with you. Well, that's their problem. I got business to take care of. I got things to do. You go be pathetic and sorry and angry about life. I am going to make things happen. That's how it is. Deal with it, right? And walk away. That's step one. Now, if that doesn't get the job done, and let's say that person keeps coming back at you, well, then you want to address it directly, fearlessly, right? It's like, hey, if you have to handle this carefully, by the way, because sometimes what people will do is they will bait you into making their drama, which is very low visibility, and they will bait you into making it more visible, right? So what you don't want to do is you don't want to be tricked into making a small drama that not too many people are seeing high viz. So what some people do is they make the mistake of like thinking, okay, well, here's this problem that I have with this person, and I'm going to send out an email to my whole email list about this because everybody must know about it. Well, the reality is probably almost nobody knows about it, right? Probably only a few people who saw one stupid Facebook post know anything about it. But what you can do is you can post a response to that Facebook post so you contain it, so that you don't make the problem any bigger than it needs to be, right? And address it straight on. Say, hey, this person is accusing me of this, right? Here's the reality of it, right? And now you can go politely F yourself, and I'm going to go do business. I'm going to go handle business. And then you get on your way, right? You address it directly and clearly, and by the way, if you did make a mistake, you fess up to that. And you say, hey, you know what? I was wrong. You were right. And here's what I'm going to do to correct it. And then you correct the problem, and then you keep moving. Now, if somebody still has a problem with you, well, then it's their problem. If you legitimately did right by them and it was a real problem. Now, another way that this can go down is you might have somebody who is going to be very, very, is going to come at you very hard, right? And is going to continue to come at you until you show them some teeth. All right. So Dr. Jordan Peterson is a very interesting psychologist who has come into renown in recent years because of the legal fights that he started with the Canadian government about some of the rather restrictive laws that they started in Canada. And one of the great pieces of advice in people is that people are not going to take you seriously in life if you don't show teeth. If you are not willing to show people that you are willing to swing back, then there are a lot of people out there who will be like, oh, okay, here is a victim. Here's a victim. And if you are a victim, you are catnip for sociopaths, right? Who does the bully attack? The bully attacks the weakest kid in the class. All right. Now, when that weak kid all of a sudden like rears up and comes back and says, okay, you want to beat me up? Fine. I'm going to make it hurt. I'm going to make it hurt so bad that you're going to think twice next time you do it. So, if somebody came at me today, the way, some people came back at me, back in the day during some of the flame wars, I would handle it very, very differently. I would have swung back a lot harder than I did back then. And I've still kind of got a file in the back of my mind. I know some of those guys that came at me, behind the scenes, they think I don't know some of the things that they did, but I do, and I know like if those guys ever come back at me again, I will not hesitate. I will not hesitate, and they will very much regret it. Now, that may sound like a cold and harsh thing to say, but friends, that is reality. That is reality. You have to be willing to fight back very hard. So, Tim, that is a super good question, and it's one that we're all going to have to deal with at some point. And I hope that makes things clear. So, Tim, it comes in with another question. All right. So, and by the way, Tim came in early and preloaded a whole bunch of questions. So, very smart move on Tim's part. He says, I was so sorry to hear that you mentioned recently that Ted Nicholas had passed away back in February. Yeah, he was a dear friend, and I miss him very much. I was introduced to him through Gary Halbert's newsletter back in the early 1990s. Gary had an interesting reputation back in the day, but I never heard anyone say a negative word about Ted. Yeah, I won't say anything about Gary's reputation. There's a Latin saying, de mortuis nihil nisi bonum, about the dead, never say anything but good. And Gary was also a good friend of mine as well. But yeah, but the personalities between Ted and Gary were very different. And, I love them both, dearly, both great guys. But you're right. Ted was the kind of guy that, nobody ever had any unkind words to say about, because he was just such a consistent and upstanding sort of a human being. He was very congruent with who he presented himself as, and he was always a gentleman to everyone. He says, I have a number of his books and audio programs on my business bookshelf, Besides Halbert, Nicholas, Joe Sugarman, Gary Bencivenga, who are some of your all-time favorite copywriters? Are there any currently practicing copywriters who you recommend studying or hiring? Do you do your own copywriting, or do you hire top-notch copywriters to do your ad writing? Do you recommend that we hire a really good copywriter to do our own ad writing, or should we learn to do ourselves? How long do you think it typically takes for someone who can write fluently to learn to become a good copywriter? Let me make some other recommendations of people that you can read. Okay, some good books to read would be Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz, probably the most important copywriting book you can read. There's another one called Great Leads, which is sort of like an unofficial sequel to Breakthrough Advertising. What it does is it takes one of the components of what Eugene Schwartz talked about inside Breakthrough Advertising and then fleshes it out, and it gives you an answer to one of the problems that Eugene Schwartz talked about. And you guys have heard me mention before the audience awareness scale, right? You know, going from problem unaware all the way up to brand aware. And then you've got, you know, from problem unaware, problem aware, solution aware, and so on, all the way up to brand aware, right? Now, the challenge here is that, you know, if you've got a guy who's problem unaware, you've got to communicate to him in a very, very different way. Now, Eugene Schwartz was talking about the lead of the advertisement. That's the headline and the first few lines of text that kind of pull you into the ad. Now, the lead that you use for these different awareness levels needs to be very different. And the book Great Leads shows you 6 different lead types to use for different spots along this awareness scale. It is an extremely useful thing. You know, it's something that I wish I had been exposed to a lot earlier on in my career, because it is a profoundly good shortcut. There's another good book. So Drew Eric Whitman is one of the you know, current guys around, one of the younger guys who's got 2 good books, Cashvertising, and then also another sort of a sequel to that called Brain Scripts. And you guys will see an endorsement from me on Brain Scripts. In fact, that's another really, really good one to read. You know, there are literally tons and tons of resources out there to go to. And what I would avoid doing is I would avoid reading too many of them, right? You know, I would say start with Breakthrough Advertising and Great Leads and kind of make that a foundation, right? Now, we also, by the way, we've got a Ted, Nicholas, and Joe Sugarman teach copywriting course in Simpleology that we haven't sold in a long time. And we might make that available. That is one of the absolute best ways to learn it. Now, also, you guys have access to Eric Graham's Ultimate Conversion Transformation. That is a modern day updating of a lot of these ideas, and it's probably the best synthesis of all of this information for the modern marketer in one location. All right. Now, when you ask, do I hire copywriters or do I write it all myself? Well, before Eric came into the company, I wrote everything myself. I mean, there were a couple of cases where I'd hired, you know, a few copywriters here and there, but, you know, 95% of it was my own stuff. You know, you could probably tell the stuff where I hired people and where it was actually me, because the voice was very different, you know. Now with Eric, Eric doesn't write, like if I write a blog post, or, you know, and I write a book, you know, I'm writing that myself, you know, that's me. But right now, one thing that Eric does is, you know, when we have these webinars that we do, like when you guys saw the single most profitable secret in history, that is a webinar. Well, Eric took one of my webinars, sat down with me and had some conversations, and then, you know, made some changes to that. He put it in his mold, because he's got a model for making webinars work. Now that's a very unusual situation for me, right? I normally wouldn't do that, because there I am, you know, but I had to be very okay with each and every word that was coming out of my mouth. So that was why, you know, Eric and I had to go back and forth, so that I was like, all right, if I'm going to be the guy standing up here saying this, I need to be behind every single word. Now, should you hire someone, or should you get good at it yourself? I would say more often than not, you're going to need to get good at it yourself, because hiring good copywriters is very, very difficult. Even the best of the best, you know, swing at the bat and miss a lot. Okay, so Dan Kennedy has this great saying where he said that there are two things that I will never outsource in my business, and that is accounting and marketing, right? And he doesn't want anybody looking at his books but him, because he doesn't trust anyone else to manage his books. Now, I wouldn't go that far. I have other people manage my books for me. Of course, I have oversight on that from multiple locations, and that way I've got checks and balances. But in terms of the copywriting, I find it incumbent upon myself to be very good at that. I would say, anybody out there in business who doesn't have good, understanding of advertising and marketing is going to be at a great disadvantage. They are always going to be at the mercy of outside agencies. And unless you've got lots and lots and lots of money to throw at those agencies, and you've got lots of venture capital to make sure that you have the money to lose on those investments, you better get good at it. Okay. So, to almost everybody, I would say, make it a point to become as good of a marketer as you possibly can. Now, a lot of people feel like, oh man, everybody told me that I should be outsourcing everything. Well, it's not as simple as, a lot of these gurus out there make it for everyone. They say, oh, just outsource it, just outsource it. Like you can wave some freaking magic wand that's going to make the perfect outsourcer that does the job right manifest out of thin air. It ain't that easy. It ain't that easy, especially with something like copywriting. Heck, it's hard to find people to do simple tasks, to outsource simple tasks. All right. Now, does that mean you've got to do everything yourself? No, of course not. In fact, you want to get to a point where you find people to do as much as possible. But finding good copywriters is one of the most difficult things. So I think it would be very wise for people to get, very good at it. Now, if you can find somebody who can, manage copy for you and do a good job of it without losing your shirt, by all means, do it. By all means, because it's going to take that off your plate. And as much as you can have taken off your plate, the better, right? But you better be very, very careful about making that decision, okay? And you better also be aware that you might have to lose some money in the process. So comes back to you. It's the hardest hire you will find is a good copywriter. All right, Praveen says, hi Mark, Praveen here, excited for the call. I have two questions, mainly on email funnels and course creation. I'm designing a 5-day email course free for my students on getting clients online. How would you recommend approaching it at a high level? I'm thinking of adding massive value in 5 days and then pitching my services, info products on the 5th day, which I'm still designing. Idea is to help data analysts, data scientists get clients online, like I've been doing for the last 3 to 4 years now. Currently, very active on LinkedIn and getting leads from here. Okay, so I think that your idea of providing strong value in the first 4 days and then kind of leading into a pitch on the 5th day is very good. That, there's all kinds of ways that you can do this, right? Now, by the way, there's nothing that should stop you from making a pitch immediately on the landing page. Like after they opt in on the thank you page, you can start pitching right there. Test it out. So what you want to do is you want to set up, different versions of the funnel. Now remember, Gary Halbert was mentioned earlier, and Gary was a guy who was famous for a saying, which was, don't make changes that whisper, make changes that scream. Right? Because when you make a change that screams, you get a bigger magnitude of difference in the result of that advertising, right? So one thing you can do is you can test, sequence A over here, where you just have somebody opt in and then you give them only the free stuff and then you drop them into the follow-up series. And then in the follow-up emails, then maybe on the 5th one, you bring them up into your pitch, right? Well, and then you could take version B here, right? And then you have them opt in, and then here you give them a pitch on the thank you page, but you still bring them into the follow-up sequence, right? And you still give them the pitch here on the final day. Now this product here, I would do something a little smaller ticket, right? Give them a small bite there, because after a free opt-in, they may not be ready, depending on what you're selling, to spend a lot more money on a higher ticket thing. Now, what you want to do is you want to compare the dollars per visitor to, or in this case, because the page is going to be the same, right? This opt-in page should be exactly the same as this opt-in page, because the only difference you're doing is you're pitching something here. What you want to do is you want to compare, in this case, dollars per opt-in, because if the landing page is exactly the same, dollars per opt-in is a better metric to look at. If by the way, there were changes on the opt-in page, you wouldn't want to do this test, right? Because you want to test one parameter at a time. Multivariate testing is far too complex for most people inside on the internet to make work. You're not going to get enough data to get data relevance with a multivariate testing. So test one variable at a time. Then what you want to find out is what is the highest dollar value per opt-in? Because maybe when you pitch the guy, it sours him a little bit on working with you, and then he's going to be less likely to take you up on the big offer, right? Now that happens sometimes not. And it will also depend on the way you structure this. Depends on the way you structure it, right? So there's 1,001 ways to do this. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't get too hung up on any one particular structure of the funnel. What I would do is I would say, you know what? The important thing is to get some funnels up and testing right away, okay? So, and by the way, get them up and then start split testing them against different versions. And then just keep throwing more data at that stuff and find out, you know, what is the better way to do it, and keep iterating things forward. Now, again, going back to Eric's course, Eric gives you, some very, very clear ideas on his very strong opinions on how you should structure these funnels. But he's even going to tell you that depending on the situation, there's no one single right way to structure funnels. Okay, there's 1,001 ways to do it. The wrong way to do it is to get hung up on the details and to not get the test live. You want to get up there, get the test live, boom, get it rolling. And then when you do the split test, make sure it's real time live split testing, right? You've got visitors coming in from the same traffic source, and then you got, the one goes here, one goes here, one goes here, one goes here, like that, real time. Because if you confound the data, or if you make a test where like you do version A on Monday and you do version B on Tuesday, that's not real testing. I've even seen some very famous marketers out there tell you, well, I tested version A on Monday and version B on Tuesday and version B won. And I said, what are you doing? That's not even the right way to test, right? It has to be real time, because I'll give you an example. Imagine, this is 2001, and you got version A up on September 10th, and then version B on September 11th, 2001, right? Well, I don't care what you had on version B, version A is almost for sure going to do better, because on September 11th, 2001, I don't think anybody bought a damn thing, but something that they maybe had to buy at the store. There probably wasn't a single sale of anything on the internet that day. I'd have to go back and look at our old records to see if we even sold anything on day, but you get my point, right? It has to be real-time live split testing. All right, so question 2 from Praveen was, what are the best approaches to design courses and market them in 2020? I'm thinking of including students and designing it with them as opposed to building it in a silo by myself. It's the chicken and the egg problem, and I really want to validate before building the info product. What I would say is, think of Jaime. The fastest way to do it is to design it with students, right? I would say that, when you're doing it with students, that means that you've got students there that you're teaching it to live in real time. That's probably a smart way to do it, because, well, A, it's going to force you to get it done very fast, because the students are going to require you to deliver value to them right away, right? So I would just say, just pick that and do it, right? And then make that, that's it. I mean, just pick that course and get it done and see how that works out. Don't get too hung up on decisions like this, Praveen. What I would tell you is make fast decisions. This is why Jaime is designed the way it is. And if you haven't learned about Jaime yet, well, then you've got to go through in your personal Ascension plan and go through some of the core training there, because that gets into what Jaime is and how to manage Jaime lists inside Simpleology and all of that, and how to use it as a decision tool. Part of the benefit of Jaime is that it will force you to make a fast decision, so that you can, not be, caught up in the paralysis by analysis of saying, which of these minor decisions is going to give me a better result. No, instead what it does is it says, you know what? I don't know if this is the right one, but I'm going to follow whichever one had the highest timing score because it's most likely to be the right thing. And I'm not going to go, is that really the right thing? I'm going to trust it, and I'm just going to go with it. Because there is something about, I'm even going to write a book specifically about this. I'm not going to tell you the idea behind it, but I mean, it's, getting you just to simply make fast decisions and move is one of the most important things that you can possibly do. And if you haven't watched that video called Relentless Focused Aligned Action inside the core training in your personal ascension plan, watch that right away, because that's going to get you in the right mindset of making very, very rapid decisions and making moves very quickly. And by the way, Simpleology is designed to get you making rapid decisions as well. And it's designed to get you moving very, very quickly. Praveen, I hope that helps you a lot. All right. Ted says, hey, Mark, I've just realized that I have a scarcity mindset and need to work on my abundance mindset. What do you recommend so I can work on this area? Whose materials is good for this? That is a very, very good question. I would say a lot of the classic self-help literature out there is probably quite good on that. Think and Grow Rich is a very, very good abundance mindset kind of book. Thought Vibration is another very good book along those lines. As a Man Thinketh is another very good book along those lines. And there are audio versions of those books that are also quite good. Now, there's another book that if you're going to read Think and Grow Rich, you've got to read, and it's a book that wasn't published until late after Napoleon Hill passed away. It was I was very surprised that when this book came out, it didn't come out with more fanfare, but it has sort of started to build more of a cult following, and it's called Outwitting the Devil. And Napoleon Hill asked in his will for the book not to be published until after all of his living family members passed away, because it was based on a he says, is it fiction or did I really have a conversation with the devil? I'll leave that to you to decide. You just read it. Whatever you believe about it, it's this amazing conversation. And it's about how the devil gets us to fall off our course in life, right? And it's a very, very profoundly important read. I would strongly encourage you to read all of that. Those 4 books would be very, very powerful for you. And another one would be one called The Magic Story. The Magic Story. The Magic Story is a very, very quick and easy read. And in fact, I think we even have a Simpleology course based on The Magic Story, an old school Simpleology course based on that, which, after you read the original book, will help you kind of, reinstill those ideas in your mind. And that's almost all about that, right? In a way. And I don't want to spoil that story for you because it's a very, very quick and easy read. And I would start with that one. That one is going to kind of like is going to flip a very important switch in your head. And then also what I would say is, Juggernaut Academy is a really wonderful way to get that instilled into your mind, because what it does is so instead of just giving you the ideas, it habitualizes the ideas, right? It turns you into, instead of, being somebody who sits around with that scarcity mentality, being somebody who is taking action with that abundance mentality. It's designed to actually ingrain those thought patterns into your mind habitually, right? So if you haven't gone through Juggernaut Academy yet, I would strongly encourage you to do that. But by all means, read all of those other books, right? I want to be very careful, right? When people ask me to recommend other things, everything you guys need is inside the Solomon's Arc Ascension Plan University, right? Now, what I want to be very careful about is that, I don't have you in a situation of overwhelm. If I recommend other books, you guys are asking me about other things to read, if you haven't gone through all of the core stuff that we have first inside Solomon's Arc University, do all that first. Right? Because that's all designed to get you the results that you need. So, be very, very careful about veering off that and, if you've done everything that we have in a particular area, like if you've done all of the business and marketing and copywriting stuff in one area, well, then go on and read Breakthrough Advertising and read all those other books that I was talking about, right? But use the materials that we have available for you here first, not just because, it's the stuff, that we do. It's because, these are materials that were developed after years of synthesizing everything else out there and doing it in a way that is going to get the most important stuff distilled into you as a habit pattern. That's the very, very important key differentiation between, it's one of the key differentiations between what we do inside Simpleology and almost everything else out there. It's rather than just dumping you, inside a sea of information. It's like, no. Let's figure out what you got to master. And let's get you to actually master that. That's the real key thing. And by the way, Ted, one last thing I'll tell you about that is that, as you do start my day with the business growth module turned on every day, you are going to get an abundance mindset that is going to occur naturally. One of the things that we have to change our view of the world is reference experiences, right? We can read all there is to read out there. We can be inspired by as many different things as are available. But once we start getting hardcore real world results in our life, that's when our mindset really changes. So when I was asked earlier about some of my earlier entrepreneurial experiences, when I got that first check in my mailbox when I was in the Army, I was like, damn, this is awesome. Who else on the post right now is getting paid to sell pieces of paper? This is pretty awesome. Like when that happened to me, that one single reference experience completely changed my mind. So when you do start my day with the business growth module turned on, that forces you on a day-to-day basis to make improvements in your business that are likely to bring you results. And once you start getting results, the abundance mindset is going to start kicking in. All right. So you want to attack this from as many different angles as possible. And one last thing I'll say is that Simpleology 203, the simple science of invincibility, access to which all of you have, is also there at your disposal. Right now, that is a very profoundly powerful way to reprogram your mind in any way you want. It introduces you to an idea called the Taft loop, T-A-F-T. So it's the Taft loop is all about this idea that A-F-T, all right? And this stands for thinking, acting, feeling, and talking, right? Now, the way we think affects the way we act, and the way we act affects the way we feel, and the way we feel affects the way we talk, and the way we talk affects the way we think. And it's not just a cycle, it's actually, they are all interrelated. So the way you talk affects not just the way you think, but also the way you feel and the way you act, and vice versa. These are all interconnected. So what you've got to do is you've got to interrupt the loop that we all have, right? Most of us, what happens is we, something negative happens on one of these areas, and then we kind of spiral out, right? So we start talking like somebody who has a scarcity mindset, or talking like a loser, and that affects our actions, it affects our thoughts, it affects our feelings, right? And then, when our thinking starts changing, well, then that starts negatively affecting our acting and then our talking again. And then this whole thing is this interrelated dynamic of these four phenomena. But when you can start to interrupt this and start to design ways of thinking, acting, feeling, and talking that make you the person that you want to become, then you become that person. It's almost magical how quickly that change can occur when you start to monitor these areas of your life. So Ted, that's something I would strongly encourage you to do right away, is to get into Simpleology 203, the simple science of invincibility, and design Taft loop patterns for yourself that reprogram your mind to become that person that you want to become. Okay, so very, very important question. Roy has a question. He says, hey, Mark and Eric, I just want to do a quick shout out that I'm really blessed for the amazing program I'm in. Thank you for the kind words. I achieved my short-term target today, as per discussed during the live we had. Awesome. Great job, brother. Now going to hit the next midterm target. I'm on my orange belt, 35 days of streak on Juggernaut Academy, Fire Academy, and Business Growth with Don't Break the Chain, Through the deal room, I had a Zoom call with John Christian as well, and looking forward to some potential collaboration too. Thank you so much. Roy, that is really great to hear, man. This is what I do this for. Guys, notice something here, okay? Roy is really doing the hard work, and I think you could tell when you saw Roy live, Roy is the kind of guy who's willing to do the hard work. That's what it takes. There are people who are willing to do the work and people who are not willing to do the work. And the people who are willing to do the work are the ones who get the results. So that is absolutely fantastic. Roy has a question for Eric here, and I'll do my best to answer this on Eric's behalf. So he says, hey, Eric, I had done my target customer as per the week 2 video on Ultimate Conversion Transformation and emailed to the email you mentioned at the end of the video. Just want to make sure it can get to you and have some specific advice on how's the first draft is doing. Okay, I will follow up with Eric and make sure that he knows. In fact, I'm going to drop that in my dream catcher here. I'm going to call up my Simpleology on my browser here as I'm talking to you guys and drop into my dream catcher that I need to make sure Eric replies to Roy Fay. Okay, boom. All right, done. All right. He also, so Roy has a very technical question here, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to answer this. Eric might be able to. So he says, hey, Eric, in Google Analytics, I'm looking for useful data to extract and make my calculated moves in my marketing approach. For example, if I rank the top users visiting the site based on states, I'll see a list. However, if I want to rank the same table and use transactions and goal conversion as the main metric, I get a slightly or totally different answer. In such cases, which should I focus on? Let me just read this again. If I want to rank the same table and use transaction and goal as the main metric, I get a slightly or totally different answer. In which case, what should I focus on? Well, what I would say is I would test both of those results out and see which one gives you the higher ROI. And that's the one to go with. I don't know if Eric is going to have a yes or no answer for either of these for you. But what I would say is whatever analytical method you're using, like let's say, one analytical tool tells you that this particular approach is going to be best. And another analytical tool tells you another one is we'll do an A/B split test between those two and see which one gives you the higher return on investment for the audience generated. Hopefully that answers that for you, Roy. All right, so Jason says, hey, Mark and Eric, I'm currently looking for ideas on creating a physical product for cheap to give away free and shipping to business owners in my area. Do you have any recommendations on where I could go to get this done? Maybe about companies you have used in the past. P.S. I don't want to write a book because I don't feel that I have accrued enough knowledge yet, and I have to turn this around fairly quickly. Thanks in advance, Jason. Okay, Jason, 2 quick things. First off, you don't have to write the book yourself. Okay, if you feel like you shouldn't be writing a book because you don't have the experience, go talk to somebody who does have the experience and interview them and turn that into a book. There are a lot of experts who would be willing to be interviewed for free just because it's like, in fact, I've had people come to me and say, hey, I'm writing a book and I want to interview people, on this particular topic. Would you allow me to include you in the book? Knowing that I'm not going to get paid for it at all. Why would I say yes to that? Because it's free publicity. It's free publicity. Okay, so that's one way that you could possibly do this. Now, a company I would recommend to you is there's a company called disc.com. That's DISK.com. I want you to contact a guy there named Joe Foley. Tell him I sent you. He should know me very well. I have a testimonial from Joe saying that, one of the launches I did with him was the fastest launch that he has done. And he handles a lot of these free plus shipping deals for a lot of people out there. In fact, a lot of the big name people out there use that company. Now, there are a few others, but that is one that I have used very, very successfully in the past, and I like and trust. All right, Carmel says, good morning, Mark and Eric. So excited to be here with you guys today. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday, Carmel. Awesome to have you on. All right, Teresa. Hey, Teresa French. She says, good evening, Mark and Eric. All right. I'm going to mispronounce your name. You corrected my pronunciation on your name. If you could tell me, I said Tulane, but I remember you correcting me and saying it was a different pronunciation. So it was something like Thulane. Is that how it is? Tell me what the right one is. But anyway, he was saying it's all good. It's all good that he heard. I think he wrote that when I was mentioning that Eric wasn't going to be able to make it in today because he's got a bit of a family emergency he's got to take care of. Leonardo says, how long is your ice bath, Mark? For how many minutes do you stay in? I'm asking because a week ago, I started to get into the cold lake every morning for a few minutes. Leonardo, I do it for 5 minutes at a time. I wouldn't recommend doing 5 minutes first to most people. I think you need to kind of acclimate yourself to that. I would start out with like even 30 seconds, and then start to move up personally. I don't know what Wim Hof's particular advice is on that, but 5 minutes is a pretty decent stretch in the ice. And you've got to make sure that you've got your Wim Hof breathing down. Wim Hof goes through different layers and levels of this, and you really want to learn this directly from him. One of the things that he talks about is that, after a while, after you get accustomed to ice baths, you want to start getting into a calmer breathing and not the standard, deep, sympathetic stimulation breath that he gets into. But, in the beginning, you want to do the sympathetic stimulation before you get into your ice bath. In fact, if I do an ice bath, every time I do it, I do like a full Wim Hof round to make sure that my body is fully charged. And then boom, I just make myself get in there and experience that excruciating pain. But the pain is not so bad. After about the first 10 or 15 seconds, it's not that bad. It kind of calms down a little bit if you're doing the breathing right. Let me tell you, back when I was doing MMA training a lot harder when I was younger, I had to force myself to do ice baths to heal my body just from all the, getting banged up so bad all the time. And I could barely stand a minute in the bath. Now, if I had had Wim Hof breathing back then, I probably would have been able to experience the ice bath in a very different way. Chunyu's here. Hey, Chunyu. He is the F-16 pilot from Singapore that you guys may have heard me refer to last week. He says, does the short, medium, and long-term major focus have to be about the same things, or could they be different? Example, short-term is to get business model clear, medium to get a six-pack, and long-term to achieve financial freedom. Chunyu, I would recommend that they are all actually in alignment. And watch that video called Relentless Focused Aligned Action, okay? I would make, personally what I would do is I would make your business stuff, your short, medium, and long-term major focus, but somehow kind of sneak some of that stuff in there, some of the reminders about like the six-pack, all right? So right now you want to get a six-pack, all right? Now, if the first thing is getting business model clear and the last thing is financial freedom, well, the six-pack is something that could happen naturally along the way, right? If you design your day correctly. So to get that six-pack, I mean, what we've got to do is it's a very simple matter of, you changing your dietary and sleep and exercise regimen, right? And to be 100% dialed in and clear about what that regimen is. So I would make your medium-term major focus something more along the lines of the financial freedom, because the short-term is in alignment with that. The long-term is in alignment, but getting the six-pack is kind of a little bit, incongruent there. Personally, I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. What I would do is instead, I would have a business-related medium-term major focus and have that getting your six-pack. You can put that, let me think of some ways to sort of design this. Well, one, you want to use Konkyo Kaizen as much as possible around your house, right? I know you and your wife are both very ambitious, right? So you could probably get some support from her, like, hey, let's get every distracting food out of the house, right? Everything that's not healthy out of the house. Let's set our lives up so that we're forced to exercise. For example, if you have a personal trainer that will show up at your door every day and grab you and work out with you either at your home or at a nearby gym, that will help things out. You want to set up triggers around your life so that you're designing your environment to make you likely to do the right behaviors, okay? So this is just going to be a matter of getting super, super disciplined about that. Now, Now, listen, I'm not going to say necessarily, not make that the medium-term major focus, but what I would say is that you tend to get better results when the short, medium, and long-term are all in alignment. Okay, so I strongly encourage you to do that. Now, but I don't want you to not go for getting a six-pack. Okay, I want you to get that, because that's going to help you get better results in everything that you do. The fitter and healthier you are, the more energy you're going to be able to bring to your business on a day-to-day basis. I just want you to use probably a different set of tools to do that. So, one thing you can use is trackers inside Simpleology, and you can create a dashboard. And when you use the Simpleology dashboard, you can look at a tracker that shows your body fat percentage. If you want to get one of those, more accurate body fat scales. And by the way, be very careful about this, because these body fat scales, most of them are not very accurate. There's the Tanita Ironman is one of the more accurate ones that you can get, because it's got handles and feet both. Some of these body fat scales are better than others. That's one of the better ones that you can actually, trust the results on. But the real thing that you want to look at is you want to look at your body. What does your body look like? That's the result. But there's something nice about tracking a number and seeing that number change, seeing that body fat percentage change. That's one way. And you can work that into Start My Day, of reviewing, you can add in a tracker and review a tracker. That's one of the Start My Day modules. Another thing you can do is you can use the Ben Franklin Habits module inside Start My Day. And you can ask yourself, it comes preloaded with Ben Franklin's 8 virtues, but you can modify it, right? One of the things that you can do there is you could just, take all of those out, and then you can rate yourself on a day-to-day basis. How did I do in the last 2 days in terms of diet, exercise, and relaxation? Relaxation, by the way, is very, very important. So you want to look at the high energy habit, by the way, because that is going to help you do a lot of the basic things you need to do to get your body together. Because one of the things that we talk about is, handling or reducing distress in your body and increasing eustress and also de-stressing, right? The high energy habit gets all into that, right? And that's all very important, because de-stressing is about relieving the pressure that your sympathetic nervous system puts on you, okay? And getting rid of distress in your body, toxic load, negative thinking, stressful thinking, negatively emotional reactions, all these things are going to lower cortisol in your body. And if you lower cortisol, your body is more efficient at unloading body fat, by the way. All right. Now, another thing that you can use is the Observe and Change module inside Start My Day. So that's going to get you to rate yourself every day on time, energy, and money. And it's going to keep looping through time, energy, and money. And every time it asks you about energy, it's going to make you think about your diet and exercise program, because the more on point your diet and exercise program is, the more energy you're going to have. You will start making that observation, and that will naturally start changing those behavioral patterns. Okay, so I think if you approach it that way, the six-pack is going to come as an incidental result of all of those behavioral changes. Chunyu, I hope that puts you on the right track. All right, Laura says, love and respect from Spain. Thanks for the team building coaching, Captain. Turn negative into positive is a real gift. Absolutely, Laura, and it's essential for us to do that while the world is going crazy right now. We're the sane ones today. And here's this name again. I'm going to pronounce it again. Tulane. Please correct me so I know how to say your name correctly next time. And I apologize to everyone. We've got people from all over the world, and some of these names are going to be very, very hard for me to pronounce. I apologize. Powerful speech mark, opportunities to find the other self that Napoleon Hill speak about. It is when we hit rock bottom that we meet the other self that makes great success possible. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that, it's funny, almost those same words that you just said were spoken by that dear friend of mine that I was coaching, just minutes before we got through this. He was saying, hey, there is something magical that happens when you're riding that knife's edge of life, is that it forces you to become very, very creative. Got it. Exactly right. Terry says, I'm just curious, because these days you can't get to all the questions on each of the mentorship calls. What happens to the questions that get submitted but don't get answered on the call? Do they get deleted immediately after the call is over, or do you by chance look them over before deleting in case you can find an awesome question that you could refer and bring back to use to teach us all in the next call? See what I did there? I gave you a subliminal suggestion for a great idea to increase the value you deliver on each call. Terry, that is a really good question and a good idea. Here's what I would recommend to everyone. So actually, that on multiple levels, it's a very good suggestion. We should probably be mining that stuff because I could turn some of those things into content as well. And I can use that content to help build the business. So it's a fantastic idea. But more importantly, and that's great. Thank you for that. But I mean, more importantly, I want to make sure you guys get your help, right? So here's the thing. If I go through all of those questions, right, and then answer all of those the next week, well, then I'm not going to get to the questions that happened that week. So what I want to make sure is that when you guys post questions and we don't get to them, that you go inside the community and you post the questions there, because you're going to get answers from people in the community helping you solve those problems. And this is the why of how we have all of this structured, so that you guys have multiple ways of getting support. All right. So Terry, it's a great suggestion, and I might use that just for content generation. And hey, if I do that, maybe what I'll do is I can link to those inside the community, so you guys can know, hey, here was a question that came up and I didn't get to, but I turned this into content. Here this is for you guys to look at. That's a great idea, actually. Yeah, let me think about that. I got to think about where we are on the growth plan of whether or not that is the most high-need thing for me to do in this moment. And you guys will notice what I did there, right? I've got to think about. There's a lot of interesting things. Is the position we're in right now? Through some pretty rapid expansion, there are a lot of very, very tricky things that I've got to navigate. So I've got to ask myself, what the most important thing I can be spending my time on is. But that's a very strong candidate. I like that. Thank you, Terry. Okay, we got a very long question here from Jordan Richter. He says, hey, Mark, thank you so much for putting this program together. I just recently signed up. A big thanks to Eric for the encouragement and inspiration on my first call with him. You're most welcome. A little bit of background about me. I'm a semi-retired professional skateboarder. I heard about you, brother. Yeah, Eric was telling me about you, who runs skateboard camps and classes throughout the Bay Area. My company name is called Enter Skateboarding. My website here, enterskateboarding.com. I'm the sole owner. I hire staff seasonally to run my programs. Since COVID-19 hit, all my programs came to a halt, and so did cash flow. We are, however, resuming with our programs this summer, but with lots of new additional rules. 6-foot PPE, all over the blah, blah, blah. On top of that, the city takes an average of 40% of all enrollment. So yeah, it's pretty much a failed model. Are you kidding me? They're making you have social distancing, and then they're taking 40% of all the... Man, oh, don't get me started. All right, so my frustration is due to the fact that there are so many unknowns, which makes me feel it's almost not worth committing to physical on-site programs anymore. I'm thinking about pivoting to bringing all my programs online. I have lots of creative ways to integrate product upsells along with course material for 6 to 12-year-olds. I have a gamified follow-along curriculum, but not sure how to implement it. There's also potential partner with other professional skateboarders, a potential to partner with other potential professional skateboarders to create a community of learning and growth with challenges in making the transition online and where to start. That's why I'm here. Also, I have a luxury perfume oil line, which has had some success on Etsy, but I haven't given much effort to creating the offer needed to drive sales. We do have almost 500 reviews at 99% 5 stars on Etsy. I'm probably overthinking shit, basically. You might be. There are 2 sites that the perfume line is. There are the 2 sites that perfume line. So enterskateboarding.com. You got the perfume line on enterskateboarding.com and Enter Skateboarding. Okay, so I see. So you put 2 sites and they're both the same site, unless I'm misreading it. So enterskateboarding.com and enterskateboarding.com are the 2 URLs that I see there. So that might be a mistake, because it sounds like you're trying to tell me the 2 websites for the perfume line. Again, I'm super excited to be here. So much respect for you. and what you've done here with this program. Hyped to be your student. Thank you for the kind words. And in closing, I really want to acquire the skills so I can serve humanity. Beyond my 2 businesses, I really want to be useful to others. Please excuse the rant. Thank you so much, Mark. No excuse necessary, my friend. And I'm very inspired by your last words there. Serving humanity is what this is all about. This is the elevation of consciousness that I think that we've all got to go through right now to be able to survive the transition tribulation. We've all got to start thinking along those lines. Now, the question as to whether or not you should mothball that offline business and whether or not you should focus on the perfume line or on the on the online skateboarding. The first thing I would do is I would look at where is the money coming from right now, right? Where the majority of the money is coming from right now, focus your energy on that and make that strong and stable enough to make sure that you got your ground base covered. That is the most important thing that you've got to do. And I don't know what your financial situation is right now, but if it's potentially unstable, you want to get it stabilized as quickly as possible. And the quickest way to stabilize it is to find the richest vein of revenue that you have right now and to expand that, because that is with a proven model. It's easier to grow a proven model than it is to take something from the ground up and then prove that unproven model. Right now, do I think you can sell online skateboarding coaching? Of course. There's so many kids out there who want to learn skateboarding. Right now, you got to be very careful about how you coach this. Right, so if it's for 6 to 12-year-olds online, you got to remember 6 to 12-year-olds don't have the money for the skateboarding course. You got to sell this to the parents. And just to give you a kind of a side idea here is you want to talk to the parents about why getting your kids into skateboarding is a good idea. You might be like, hey, are you afraid of your kids getting hurt because they're getting into skateboarding? Well, let me tell you what the benefits are of skateboarding. If you wear proper protective gear, a helmet and, elbow pads and knee pads and all of that. When I was a young punk rock kid, I grew up around skaters. I wasn't much of a skater myself. I hurt myself on a half pipe, I never really got into it, but I was more of a punk musician, but I was in that same scene, when I was younger. So I know a lot of those guys who took that seriously got a lot of benefit from that. You can help parents understand that, like, hey, you see this as a negative in your kids. Let me show you why this is a positive, right? It's going to you're going to teach your kid how to be safe first and foremost, right? You're going to teach them the importance of safety. You're going to teach them to be athletic. You're going to give them a skill that they can be proud of, right? When you can do a really cool trick. I remember watching my buddies, on the half pipes, doing these just, crazy cool tricks. I was always so impressed. And I never really took the time because I was more interested in music and other things. I never took the time to become good at it. I was always so impressed by seeing people do that. But whenever you have a skill that you can be proud of, it boosts your self-esteem. And that self-esteem will, expand out into other areas of your life. So if you can reframe it in the minds of the parents that the kid's desire to be a skateboarder is actually a good thing, then you're going to be more successful at selling that to the parents. Now, that sounds like a bit of a tangent, but that's very important for you to get that messaging, because remember, the 6 to 12-year-olds are not going to have the money to do it. And what you might want to have is a special website where you have the 6 and 12-year-old kids. If you have some content that's targeted towards the 6 and 12-year-olds, you can say, hey, if you don't have the money to buy this and you want your parents to buy it for them, here's a website you can send your parents to. Because the 6 to 12-year-old kids are going to be searching online for information about skateboarding. They're smart enough to do that, 6 and 12-year-olds today, if their parents are letting them online. And then you can even tell them, you can target some content to the kids, but then tell the kids, hey, by the way, here's a site I made for your parents between you and me, where we can get your parents to get behind you, and they will buy this course for you if you send them here to this website, right? Maybe even make the kid an affiliate. Who knows, right? That would be kind of a cool way to do it. I don't know if that's illegal. You check with your lawyer on that one. I don't know if it's legal to make a 6 to 12-year-old kid an affiliate. But if I were a parent, I wouldn't mind it. My 10-year-old kid making money from selling me on something. I would be impressed if my kid did that, right? Anyway, there's some random thoughts for you. In terms of your offline business, this whole situation may change, brother. I mean, it might. We don't know what's going to happen here. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how things develop over these next several weeks and months. It's possible that we might get back to some kind of normal. It depends on who takes power in the world right now, quite frankly. It's very hard to know who is on the side of good and who is on the side of bad, whose intentions are good and whose intentions are not so good in the world right now. But depending on how things go, it's altogether possible that the whole world may open back up. Now, I think that we've got greater threats on the horizon if you read your roadmap to money in 2020. But it would be nice, if we had a little bit of reprieve and this whole COVID panic went away. Now, I say COVID panic because I don't know what the reality of the situation is, to be honest with you. I don't think any of us do. None of us really know how serious the virus is, because there's all kinds of conflicting data out there, and there's conflicting information about how people are counting COVID patients, that they might be over counting them, because there are some cases, for example, in the United States, we're giving hospitals subsidies. If they declare a patient as having passed away of COVID, they get a subsidy for that. So there might be some incentive to inflate the numbers here a little bit. I don't know. It's very hard to say what's going on with this situation. That's why I say COVID panic, because the panic is the thing we know for sure. Do we know that, how real the pandemic is? I just don't know. And I know there are a lot of people who think what I'm saying is blasphemy right now, but I defy anyone to show me consistent data that everyone in the world agrees with. There's so much argument and so much disagreement about what the reality of the situation is. If the reality of the situation is that the pandemic is overblown, right? And I think there's a very strong possibility of that, actually, right? Maybe one thing we might do is we might say, hey, there is a real risk for people who are of a certain age, right? But we will give them the option of isolating themselves. And if they do have to be isolated, maybe we can help them, but open up the rest of the world. That's altogether possible. That could happen. So I wouldn't necessarily dismiss the idea of your offline business coming back, right? So one really nice thing here is, so you've really got two primary businesses. You've got the perfume business and you've got the skateboarding business. Now, the skateboarding business, the nice thing about it is that if you are selling the online skateboarding stuff, you can take that business and you can have some parity between your online skateboarding business and your offline skateboarding business. They can be synergistic. The perfume business, is kind of a whole separate thing. But it sounds to me like right now, your strongest play is to focus on the perfume business. Now, by the way, maybe we need to get you on live as a guest, because I need to ask you a lot of deeper questions. And yours is really interesting and fun, right? A dude who's like teaching people skateboarding. I know I'm going to have a fun conversation with you, because you were probably involved in the punk rock movement when you were a kid. Almost everybody who was in skateboarding was, to some extent or another. So we might have some fun conversations about that. But the other thing is I need to get more details about what's actually going on in your business. So Jordan, what I would ask you to do is email support@simpleology.com and let us get you scheduled as a live guest in one of the live mentoring sessions, so we can do a deeper dive on your business. But right now, my gut is saying the smartest thing is to probably focus on the perfume business, because that's up and existing and it's profitable, and really blow that up, if my assumptions about it are correct. And from the numbers that you were saying, it sounds like it's currently doing well. But we do need to have a deeper conversation, and I hope you will come on as one of the live guests, so we can do that really strong deep dive and just pull it apart and find out exactly what's going on. All right. And great to meet you, Jordan. Erica mentioned you to me, so that's very cool. All right, Robert Frost. All right, Robert says, while researching my niche of homeschooling mothers, I have not been able to find any products they as a group buy besides training in how to homeschool. And I have only found one stack to emulate, and that's parents.fulfillmentsourcecode.com/avoid-mistake. Except for this one, the advertisements have little in the way of hooks. How can I find examples of formulate my funnel? Okay, so Robert, what I will tell you is you don't have to necessarily formulate funnels that are targeted towards homeschool moms. Okay, you can find any kind of a funnel that's targeted towards any kind of a similar product. All right, so any kind of a training module funnel is one that you can funnel hack, that you can model and look at. All right, so expand your thinking there. Now, the other thing that I want to say is that so I want to point something out really interesting here. So what is every homeschool mom? What is she also? She is also a mom. Okay, so every homeschool mom that you talk to, because she is also a mom, ask yourself, what else are mothers going to be interested in buying? And I hope that that was just a big atomic bomb going off in your head to show you the larger potential of what you have at hand here. Okay, this is sort of the magic alchemy of integration marketing. Once you start expanding your thinking and start seeing what the real revenue potential of your business is, you automatically become more profitable right out of the gate. So Robert, I hope that was the answer you were looking for. If not, send some follow-up. And we might need to get you in on live mentoring as well. And you're very welcome to come in and show up. All right, Augustine says, why do I pay $500 a month while others pay $47? Augustine, anybody who's paying $47 a month is not they're not paying $47 a month for Solomon's Ark. They're paying $47 a month for Simpleology Elite. Okay, they don't get all of this stuff that you get. They don't get Integration Marketing Society lifetime membership. They don't get the live mentoring. They don't get all of the training. All they get is the software. So the $47 a month thing, if you see anybody paying that, that's what they're paying for. All right. All right. So Rebecca says, hey guys, good morning from Dublin. So in the last month, I focused on writing my creative mindset course. It will be an 8-week online course with 2 Q&A sessions per week for the 8 weeks. The problem, the world needs more creative thinkers and change makers that understand how to tap into the sea of possibility and bring about innovation and solutions to our dissolving systems. I love the way you phrase that. Creative ability is the #1 skill required for all jobs in 2020 and beyond, yet less than 22% of the population consider themselves to be creative. They are all confused between creativity and artistic ability, yet creativity is a uniquely human pleasure. It is, in fact, responsible for our evolution. We are quite weak species, not the fastest or the strongest, but we have used our creative abilities to take control of the planet. You got that exactly right. The world needs people to unleash the creator within and become the architects of their own lives. So beautifully said. My solution, Wired for Wonder. Ooh, that's a good name. That's a really good name. Alliteration is always good. The defeat of habit by originality to overcome everything. Wired for Wonder is a 4-step process. 1, conceive. Discover your most untapped personality traits and find out what type of creator you are. There are 8 archetypal creative personalities. Knowing which one you are is a huge step in understanding your ability and where your passion will lie. I'm very curious as to where those 8 archetypes came from, by the way. So 2, commence. Learn the skills and tools needed to release the force of creative power through my tried and tested processes that I've used for over 20 years. Awesome. 3, connect. Absorb the ability to create your life in flow through intuition and inspiration. Learning how to connect to your creative center and access flow through scientifically proven processes. Beautiful. 4, construct. Become the vortex for your creation and master the art of fulfillment. Send your creative energy out into the world for the benefit of all. My question, how do I launch this? With a funnel or with a small campaign or webinar? How much should I charge? Thanks, Rebecca. Rebecca, that is a very good question. I want to have you on as a live guest also as well on live mentoring so that we can hear more about that. My gut is that people aren't going to spend huge dollars for creativity depending on how you communicate it to them. Okay. And by the way, guys, this is going to be the last one I'm going to take for today because we're at the blue blocker time. All right. So this is a very interesting thing. Creativity is as important as you say. Getting people to understand that is going to be a very, very significant challenge. So depending on who you target with this, all right, and depending on who you actually or how you communicate it, all right, is going to radically change how people respond to it. All right, some people are going to see this as like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to learn, how to be a better person, right? And they're going to see that in kind of like this self-help, self-improvement price range. But if you were to communicate it in a way that, they would learn to become, better entrepreneurs, if it would open up more revenue opportunities for them, that would radically change the way people perceive it. So imagine, if you target this towards creative writers, how much money are creative writers going to have, right? But if you target it towards entrepreneurs and then you tell them, hey, you know what? The real problem for you as an entrepreneur, the reason why you're not as successful as an entrepreneur as you can be is because you haven't tapped into your creative potential enough. And once you do tap into your creative potential, you're going to have better marketing ideas, you're going to have better product ideas, and you're going to be more successful as an entrepreneur. Now, here's the challenge with you on this. All right. So you need to have proof. You need to have evidence. All right. So in the book, The Irresistible Offer, one of the things that I tell people is that unconsciously people have inside their minds the big four questions. What are you selling me? What is the price? Why should I believe you? And what's in it for me? Okay. Now, the question of why should I believe you is why you've got to have some proof. So it's one thing to tell entrepreneurs, hey, if you do my class, you're going to be more successful. You're going to be more profitable. If you had some case studies of people where that was in fact the case, and if you can draw those out and then you target entrepreneurs, you'll be able to charge a lot higher price. Now, the reason I say this is depending on what your price range is going to depend on whether you have a funnel or a webinar, right? Because, to sell something at a higher price, you're going to tend to need to have a VSL or a webinar, right? It tends to be like, price ranges would go from like funnel to VSL to webinar, right? So depending on the price that you want to sell it at. So what I would say is this is something that has to be tested. But here's something I want to kind of leave all of you with to think about. So, Rebecca, I really want to have you on as a guest on one of the live mentoring because you've got such great comments and your paradigm sounds so wonderful. You need to understand that every single product that you sell doesn't have one target market. It doesn't have one target market. You remember we were talking before to Jordan about the skateboarding business. And you'll notice how I was talking about targeting this to parents, right? You can target not just one particular group of parents. You could target the parents of autistic kids, for example, right? Is there a benefit? Is there a tangible benefit to getting a kid with autism on a skateboard? Maybe that's dangerous. I don't know. Maybe it's not a good idea, right? But I mean, you see where I'm going with this, right? Or students who are, parents of kids who are bad students and how skateboarding can make them better students. That's yet another vertical market, right? Or maybe, you've got, guys, who are in their 30s, who are in their, midlife crisis, who like, hey, they want to get back and do something kind of cool like that a kid would do. That's a whole other target market for skateboarding. Right? There's many, many different target markets for skateboarding. And every product that you guys bring to me always has a multiple target markets. And what I would do is I would say, pick one, right? Pick one, list them all out on a list inside Simpleology, Jaime rate each different approach, and then find whichever one has the highest Jaime score and attack that one. And Rebecca, right off the gate, I would say, creating your course as something for entrepreneurs to become more successful entrepreneurs would probably be the most likely higher ticket offering you could create. Why do I say that? Because entrepreneurs like to spend money on their business, right? They're trained to spend money on their business. They know that they have to spend money on their business to become successful, to get to be successful in business, I mean, you've got to get trained. You've got to have, you got to have the right guidance. You got to have the right tools, right? Entrepreneurs understand that. Now, if you can sell your product at a higher ticket, you are more likely to be successful with that product, because it's much easier to sell one copy of something for $1 million than it is to sell 1 million copies of something for $1. It's a much, much easier proposition. So it tends to be that the higher the ticket, the more likely the success of the business is going to tend to be. Now, should we limit ourselves to that? Nope. You should take this whole thing and you should design it so that you can target parents, for example, and maybe you and Jordan, could be doing some integration marketing together, right? Okay. And in fact, we've got, another gentleman here who was, so Robert Frost, talking to homeschooling mothers. The three of you all have products that are potentially sold to parents. Are you guys aware of that, right? So right now, it's very interesting, and this just clicked as I said this. The three of you could all be doing integration marketing together, right? So Rebecca, to really just summarize this and to make this clear for everyone, every product has multiple vertical markets. Every different vertical market that you address is going to require a very different approach, right? And the only way to find this out is to test. So use Jaime as your guide, make a very fast decision, take that first one, whichever one has the highest Jaime score, attack it with a vengeance, and then see how it goes. Get that built up and systemized if you can, as best as possible. And then maybe take that same business and then move it on and pivot over into another vertical market once you have that systemized and growing on its own. If you can get some assets in place to get that growing without your assistance, which is altogether very possible. Let me give you guys one last thought here, something that you can consider as a hire. What if you were to hire someone in your business to do integration marketing for you all day long? What would that look like? What would that do for your business? Now, you may not be in a position to hire someone like that right now. That's fine. But I'm planting a seed in your mind for something to shoot for, right? If you have those systems built up and then you have people out there doing integration marketing for you, well, then you are now freed up so that as that business grows and expands, let's say you have a table with 1,000 legs built up for one vertical market for that business. You can take that same business model and target somebody else. You can target, corporate executives, entrepreneurs, homeschoolers. There's so many different ways that you can sell this one particular product that we're talking about. But the problem most people have is that they have one preconceived notion of how they're going to sell that product. They sell it within the framework of that one preconceived notion, and then it succeeds or it fails. And then that's it. And they think that's the whole of the revenue potential. But it's only a fraction of the revenue potential. It's only a fraction of the revenue potential. All right, folks, I want to leave you with that for tonight. I hope you guys have a beautiful day or night, depending on wherever you are. And I will see you guys inside the community. I hope you guys are following the day-to-day battle plan on a day-to-day basis, and that you are mixing it up inside the deal room on a day-to-day basis as well. Guys, take advantage of all of the resources you have at your disposal. And you guys have some tremendously powerful resources at your disposal inside the community, inside Solomon's Ark University, and here on the live broadcasts. It would be a shame if you didn't get full advantage out of everything that you have access to here. And the one key thing is making sure that you do the day-to-day battle plan. I think you guys maybe heard me tell this story before, but one of the things that I remember, people would say in the U.S. Army, if you weren't, doing your hardest during physical training, they would say, you're not cheating the government, son, you're just cheating yourself, and that's the reality. If you're not doing the day-to-day battle plan, you're not cheating anybody but yourself. You got to get in there and you got to take that seriously every single day, because that is what is going to get the real results in your business. There's a very, very profoundly important purpose for every single thing and every part of the day-to-day battle plan. All right, folks, I will see you in the community, or I will see you on the next live broadcast. Meanwhile, keep fighting the strong fight and keep getting out there and hitting it hard every single day. All right, you guys have a great night or day wherever you are.